This is your second or third SAT Talks, am I right?
Yeah, second.
It's a second. So tell us a little bit let's start with Acton. PovertyCure is an initiative of Acton Institute. So give us a little bit of an idea of who Acton Institute is.
Absolutely. So the Acton Institute is a research and education organization in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we're really looking at what's the synthesis between economics and the Christian faith. And we look at a whole host of issues that are related to that. And we're really trying to base everything in a proper understanding of the human person made in the image of God. And everything flows from that, including our poverty initiative.
And your background is?
Background is in public policy, a lot of public policy. I worked for an organization that developed model legislation, but also worked with a child sponsorship organization, training, consulting our international staff in 16 different countries, and then also did a little training and whatnot in the software sector as well.
Yeah. And is it fair to say that Acton Institute is a think tank?
It is indeed a think tank.
It's a think tank.
Yeah.
So you got a lot of smart people up at Acton. How many here have ever been to an Acton Institute? A few of you have. Okay, so some of you are familiar with them. So a lot of really smart people. And then a number of years ago, they developed an initiative called PovertyCure. Tell us a little bit about PovertyCure.
Yeah. So PovertyCure is initially was really trying to ask some new questions about poverty. We saw that too often people would always ask, how do we alleviate poverty? And we wanted to kind of flip that and start thinking about how can people themselves that live in material poverty, how can they create wealth for themselves, their families, and their communities? So we really thought asking that second question instead would really guide new actions and would really actually help people understand that it's business, it's enterprise. That's the solution to poverty versus endless charity. Whereas charity is necessary in relief situations, that's not a long-term solution. And so we wanted to shift that conversation to that question. And from that, really wanted to focus on people's ground the battle against poverty in the fact that as made in the image of God, we're creative, everybody's creative, including people in material poverty. And so what kind of creative capacity and potential do these people have? And utilize that and focus on that rather than the typical view of people as just being destitute and in privation. We thought if you could switch that view of people, then a lot of great things could start happening.
Yeah, and your flagship projects, I mean, have to do with a couple of film, a DVD series and a film. Tell us a little bit about Poverty Inc. and the Poverty DVD Series.
Yeah, so we have kind of two film products. The first is PovertyCure, which is a 6-part video series, about 25 minutes in length on average for each episode. It's great for church implementation in Sunday school or training people before they go on a missions trip. And it's been used throughout schools and nonprofits throughout the country, throughout the world. And it comes from a specifically Christian perspective. As Christians, how should we think about people in material poverty? And then how should we approach it? And we particularly take a look at what are the unintended consequences of some of our actions when we try to help the poor. What if we don't think through secondary actions of what might happen, we could actually undermine people that we're trying to help. We also look at what are the foundations that are necessary for human flourishing. So a lot of people don't really understand that you need things, it sounds academic, but you need things like property rights and rule of law and these foundational institutions that are required for true flourishing. And so we wanted to articulate that to people as well through video form. Poverty Inc. is our documentary that was made for general audiences. It's been very successful. It's been screened many places, well over 60 countries. We have, it's been shown at MIT, Stanford, all the various Ivy League schools down to, smaller, lesser known schools as well. And it's also been embraced across the political spectrum. So even Michael Moore, who is probably a little bit more progressive than us at the Acton Institute,
little?
just a little, really embraced it and thought it was a must-watch film. So we really appreciated that, and we were really intentional trying to not alienate anybody, but just really say, hey, these are some issues that we all need to think about and that we can all agree on. And it really looks at international aid and how aid, as we've done it, you mentioned earlier Dead Aid and Dambisa Moyo, and many other economists have written about the negative impact of international aid as we've traditionally done it. And so this film really gets at some of those things that we've unintentionally done, maybe in some cases have intentionally done to undermine developing countries.
So I want you to just I want you to speculate a little bit about why do you think this message coming from an organization that is very conservative, I mean, Acton in terms of the political spectrum is going to be on the very conservative side of things, and yet you have been able to develop a film that makes sense to, I would argue, Michael Moore isn't just a little different. He represents a polar opposite in terms of the fundamental. What is it about this message that seems, in your opinion, that seems to transcend those kinds of political agendas?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this understanding. They have this compassion for people in material poverty, regardless of where you come from. I think people, both on the left and the right, Christians, non-Christians, whatever, they have this understanding of people have dignity and they have value. Unfortunately, a lot of our secular friends don't even, they use Christian language without even realizing it. You know, the fact that people have intrinsic value is not a secular idea. That came straight from Genesis. And so they don't even realize that. But I think God has built that into us, and so it resonates with people regardless of where they're coming from. And in the idea that the way we help people could actually hurt people, this, you know, when helping hurts or toxic charity kind of discussion that we've been having for a number of years now, a lot of people just hadn't heard that. And so by putting it in kind of a film medium, that message was able to get out to lots of people, because people they really do want to help truly, and they want to make sure that what they're doing is not undermining people. And so that shock that, you know, what they typically do is actually hurting, resonated with them. They wanted to start avoiding that, and the film just was able to really convey that to them.
Yeah. So how many of you have a set of the PovertyCure DVD series? Okay, because if you don't, we have a free copy. I mean, I think they run for about $1,200, don't they? Yeah, and we got them for free here, so I'm only kidding.
25.
25 if you order for midnight tonight. And so we've got, for those of you that don't have a copy of the PovertyCure DVD, and let me brag on these folks. So I don't know anybody that has done a better job of telling the story. So there are some brainy heads up there at Acton, some people that can talk in very long, multi-syllable words. One of the things that fascinated me about them was, while they can carry on those kinds of conversations, what Michael Matheson Miller did with the PovertyCure Inc. movie and the PovertyCure DVD series is he did a fantastic job, and his team, of putting this in language and in story form such that everybody can understand it. And I kind of think that what he has done is, you know, they've done kind of a new sensibility. They've put words to what all of us are trying to feel right now, and saying, okay, how do we create the conditions by which people lift themselves out of poverty?
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. What Michael would say, and what my experience has been too, that for many people working in international development, or even trying to help and serve people here, there's been a tension and a tacit kind of understanding that this isn't working. The traditional models just aren't working, but people couldn't quite articulate why. And many people told Michael, many people have told me that the PovertyCure series and the Poverty Inc. film just kind of enable them to say, that's what's wrong. It gave them a language or a vernacular to use to help understand that internal tension that they were feeling, and really helped them in that way.
So, and what Andrew and I have been talking together over the last 3 years or so is that Acton, and they're a think tank. They're not investing in practical models and stuff like that. They're very focused on which is why I am just tickled that they will work with us, because what we're trying to do is get in the trenches with churches and say, okay, now that you understand it, now that you have a language for it, it takes a while. It takes time to do this stuff. So I'm a huge fan of what they're doing. Significant Matters certainly appreciates what you folks have done. We're getting ready to do a smaller version of Sat Talks up in Lafayette, and you'll hear about that a little bit later. And they've been one of the significant sponsors for that. And we hope as we move forward that we can continue to work with them and, kind of be somewhat of a practical arm. And Andrew's doing a lot of fighting for us in that whole relationship moving forward. So I appreciate you. Wealth of information and knowledge. Be sure to get him off in a corner and pick his brain about some stuff before he gets out of here the next couple of days. So, Andrew, thank you for being here with us. Thank you.